Hey guys, it's Jen. Today I wanted to do a first look at the new ABH Norvina Pro Pigment Palette Volume 1. This just released earlier in the week, and I picked it up during the last day of the Sephora sale, so I was able to get it for 20% off. It does retail for $60, which is a bit more expensive than their regular palettes, which are around $42 each, but it also contains a lot more product. Looking at it next to the original Norvina palette, you can see how much larger it is. There are 25 shadows versus 14, and each one is 1.8 grams, while the shadows in the older palettes are 0.71 grams each. So for $18 more, I definitely think you're getting what you pay for. Also, the formula of the new palette is supposed to be professional grade according to the website. So the description on Sephora.com says Norvina Pro Pigment contains 25 highly pigmented, iconic colors, daring brights, and vibrant professional pigments in oversized pans to offer limitless possibilities. It's perfect for the artist who wants to have the ultimate color collection and for the makeup fanatic who is ready to take their makeup creativity to the next level. So I would definitely agree with that statement, as I do believe this palette is best for people who love color and also professionals who are looking to create bolder looks than what you would see kind of in everyday life. It also has 8 shimmer shades and 17 mattes. Just to note, 2 of the mattes do have micro glitter in them, but they show up mostly matte on the skin. So looking at the shades, I don't feel like this is something I could see myself reaching for very often. I gravitate more towards neutrals, and while I do like playing with color sometimes, I like a palette to have a variety of neutral shades mixed in. This one really doesn't offer much in the way of neutrals except for 1 shimmery brown, 2 matte browns, and a black, and they're all on the deeper side, which I really wouldn't be able to use as a crease or a blending shade on my fair skin tone. The lighter mattes in this palette that I would use for a transition shade are the yellows, some of the purples, and possibly that medium orange shade. So you really have to love creating colorful looks to get much use out of this palette, in my opinion. If you're more about the neutrals and only use color occasionally, I really don't think I would run right out and get this one. But let's go ahead and take a look at some swatches, because I want to show you the formula, at least how it performs in a swatch. To be able to fit them all on my arm, I'm going to do 2 rows of swatches, so I'm going to divide the palette in half from top to bottom. So if it sounds like I'm skipping around on the shade names, that's why. So first up, we have shade A1 and C4. Next is A2 and C5. Then we have A3 and D1. A4 and D2. Next is A5 and D3. Then B1 and D4. Next is B2 and D5. And then B3 and E1. Then we have B4 and E2. B5 and E3, C1 and E4, and then C2 and E5, and last but not least, we have C3. So as you can see, the matte shades are incredibly pigmented. I would say more so than Anastasia's regular formula. They do have a lot of fallout though. This is a look at the paper towel I was using to wipe off my fingers, and before I swatched each shade, I shook off the excess shadow, and this is what came off. There was also a ton of fallout all over the palette itself, which I shook into the sink, and it made a huge mess. So that's just something to keep in mind. The shimmer shades were a little bit more disappointing for me. I tend to love Anastasia's shimmer formula because even though they do have fallout, they're super intense and really shiny on the eyes. These felt more firmly pressed into the pan, and they were more difficult for me to pick up. Granted, they don't have tons of fallout, but I do feel like they don't come off as vibrant and metallic either. Overall, the formula feels very similar to Natasha Denona. That's probably the closest thing I could compare it to. So now let's go ahead and look at some of the other palettes in my collection that might be similar to this one. When I first saw the palette announced, I immediately thought it looked like Natasha Denona based on the shape of the pans, but I also thought that it looked like her Sunset palette and Lila palette had a baby. As it turns out, it's a little bit more like the new Sunrise palette and Lila combined, as I feel like the Sunset palette had a ton of neutrals in it, and Sunrise has more of those bright shades that this Norvina palette has. Personally, I like that the Natasha Denona palettes are colorful but still offer a lot of neutrals to work with and mix in with the brights. I understand that neutrals have been done to death, and Norvina was trying to do something new and different with this, but I just want to give my personal opinion because I know a lot of you guys might feel the same way. Next, I also wanted to compare it to the Profusion Festival palette. This one is like $13, so it's very affordable. Obviously, the formula is going to be different and not as pigmented, but the Festival palette includes many of the same shades. It has the yellows, oranges, the reds and the pinks, also the blue and purple. They're not exactly the same, but I did want to show it because if you already have the Festival, which I know a lot of you guys do, you already have those brighter, bolder colors to create looks with. Another one that I thought was very similar is the Ace Beauté Quintessential palette. Granted, it doesn't have as many shades as Norvina, but it does have a very similar vibe with the deep rich blue and plum shades. It also has the yellow, the orange, and the corals, plus their formula is awesome, so I definitely wanted to point out the similarities between these two. Also, I had to show you some ABH comparisons because I've seen a lot of people saying this new palette is a combination of their three most recent palettes, Jackie Aina, Alyssa Edwards, and Riviera. I don't have the Alyssa Edwards palette, but here's a look at the Jackie palette next to it. I definitely see a few similar shades like the purples and the pink and the red. The oranges in the Jackie palette are more muted and definitely not as bright as the ones in Norvina. Riviera also has quite a few similar shades. It has the purple matte, it has two yellows, the hot pink, the deep matte brown. It also has that bright white shade. I think out of all of the Anastasia palettes, this one is definitely the most similar. Another one in my collection that I thought was similar was the Violet Voss Hashtag palette. This one does have a lot of similar shades from the yellows and oranges to the purples. It doesn't have the hot pinks or the blues, but if you're more about that like purple, orange, and yellow combo, the Violet Voss one is gorgeous, and it also has more neutrals in it as well. And then last but not least, I wanted to show you a ColourPop palette that I made a few weeks ago because it kind of looks like a toned down version of this new Norvina palette. I think the combination of purples and blues and oranges give it a similar vibe, but I had also added a bunch of neutrals to my palette, so I'll show you the photo that I posted on Instagram when I first got this, and it lists all of the shades that I used just in case you wanted to create your own ColourPop palette. So you can always pause the video at this point and just, you know, write them down, or if you're ordering from the website, you can just use this for reference. But I feel like with a few tweaks, I can make this palette even more like the Norvina one. For example, I'm going to switch out this taupe shade for Take Flight, which is a bright matte yellow shade. I can also replace this light brown matte for Chauffeur, which is a shimmery yellow-orange color, and it looks very similar to another shade in the Norvina palette. And then finally, I could take out this pale matte lavender and swap it for Thank You Next, which is a metallic rosy bronze. It looks a lot like shade C3 in the Norvina palette, which is right in the middle of the palette. So as you can see, it's already looking a lot more like the Norvina palette, and these are just the similar shades that I have. ColourPop has a ton of single shadows to choose from, and I bet you could create something almost exactly the same for a lot less money. Their 24 pan palettes are $45, and their formula is one of my all-time favorites. Alright guys, so that's basically it for now. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up. I'd also love to hear your thoughts about this new palette down in the comments below. I'm super curious to hear what you think about it. Also, if you like videos like this, please consider subscribing to my channel. I do a lot of comparisons on new palettes as well as makeup reviews. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!